Our next speakers are keeping with our afternoon theme of philanthropy and investment. And we're also going to bring in the local angle here. So it's the subject matter these gentlemen have been assigned or have chosen, I'm not sure which, is land use and smart planning in the West. Reading their bios and reading up about them, and I've been reading in the paper, one's a local writer, they both evoke the humility of walking your talk, and the actions speak louder than words. So basically, Paul, who's on the right, has been a professional writer in the Aspen Valley for many years. Recent book, you can probably get a signed copy later on, called The High Road to Aspen. It's probably available for sale in the next room. And then one of the organizations he's involved with is Huts for Vets. We've got this incredible 10th Mountain Hut system, and it's a fantastic remote resource. And so his organization's nonprofit works to bring vets in to the wilds to do some of the healing that what we all need to do, but them especially. And then to his left is John McBride, the founder of the Sopris Foundation. He's again been here for 150 years, or 40 perhaps, and came in the 60s back when Aspen was a sleepy little town, and has watched it change quite a bit. Has been involved in many, many things, but is doing a lot of work through his actions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to them. They're going to have their chat with each other and talk about what they're doing here with regards to land use.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
So where do we start? We've lived here for over 40 years, both of us, and have seen change in the valley. When you come in here as a newcomer, you might not recognize that there is a pressing issue here, which is the development and sprawl of rural landscapes, and for rather dubious uses, which we'll talk about in a minute. But John, just your reflection as a landowner and a ranch owner here. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, as you know, Paul, I came a little before you to Aspen, and in Aspen back in '66 when I came, there were about 1,500 people in Aspen and about 65 farms and ranches down the valley, a 2-lane road down to Glenwood, and we were just starting Snowmass. It was a marvelous community. It was like a college campus for adults. Everybody in town, 99% of the homes were occupied by locals, and now we've seen a huge, massive change. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of it, but in the urban area of Pitkin County now, there are about 9,000 people, and in the rural area, which is about 120 square miles, there's another 9,000. So there's been a huge shift, and the town of Aspen is occupied with about 35% locals, as it's become a second home center or country club, so to speak. So we've had a huge change through the last 50 years or so into something vastly different than what we originally came to experience.
And so this applies not only to community and sense of community and belonging, but to energy. There's a big energy issue here. John brought a newspaper article, actually it's an advertisement for real estate, which is, along with construction, the two biggest industries in the valley. This ad shows what we call a mega mansion or a starter castle. It's
home.
It says live boundless, and the price of this little estate is $58 million. At least that's the asking price. This is the kind of development that is now beginning to encroach on rural areas, and there's huge pressure to do this because a lot of people stand to take advantage of it financially and economically. But these homes end up being huge consumers of energy. They're vacant the majority of the year, and they just are a huge draw on resources here. And they're also, to people of John's and my sensibilities, a blight on the rural community. And this rural community is important because it offers a sense of legacy for what this country was. And it allows people, our children, our grandchildren, and those far in the future, to maybe understand what life was like in rural America, which is, I think, a vanishing and endangered geography. And there's the thought that conservation of these places through important and careful legislation asks the question, doesn't the present owe the future a chance to know the past? We think it does. We think there's value in remembrance of what this country was like.
Well, living in one of the most beautiful valleys in the world, we have rules and regulations, zoning, but we never went far enough. The belief was that by just zoning and what have you, we'd protect the area. We tried to copy a TDR program from Montgomery County, Maryland, where TDRs, development rights from the country, were transferred to the urban areas. Unfortunately, we allowed people to use them in the rural areas. And so we get these monster homes like this that are very, very wasteful. They might be 10, 12,000 square feet. They're really not homes, they're private hotels, and they've invited speculation and raised land values immensely, as well as construction. So people living here, the old community, is being forced out and driven further down valley. So while these empty estates are burning more and more energy, the locals are moving further and further down and driving the freeway up and back and forth to Aspen. So we have created more energy waste than we ever imagined. And part of the reason is we didn't anticipate this, and we have zoning countywide and statewide that is exploiting all this. It's turning Pitkin County into a rural subdivision, all on 35 or 30 acres, which is just ludicrous. Roads everywhere, wells everywhere. I'm a pilot, and I've flown all over the West and seen this happening in other places, maybe not as extreme here or as in Vail and other places, but I've also flown with friends in Europe, and I've been just shocked, say, flying from the Pyrenees to Paris, to look and sat in a window seat and looking out and seeing for maybe 450 miles about 30 or 40 small towns and not one rural subdivision. So as you probably know, Europeans are using about half as much energy as all of Americans per capita. Here in the Roaring Fork Valley, I would guess if we analyzed it, we're probably using 4 times as much, and we do not have policies to curb that and correct it. Got to work on that. The work you guys do and energy is wonderful, but we've got to have a better playing field, better rules and regulations, because we are making the classic American mistake of suburbanizing all our countryside.
And it's one thing to, oh, thank you. Good speech. Delayed response there. Probably the high point of this whole home building craze occurred in the late 80s when the largest home, to my knowledge, in Pitkin County was built, 55,000 square feet by Prince Bandar bin Sultan bin Abdulaziz. He was then the ambassador to the US from Saudi Arabia. And the prince wanted a vacation palace, basically, and proposed this enormous home. It has a replica of an Irish pub, 13 bedrooms, 26 bathrooms. And I think John and I were about the only ones to attend the public hearing in protest of this. And it's because the self-interest in the community, money rules. And Prince Bandar had not only pledged to build his house with huge budget for contractors and subcontractors, but he gave very generously to all the nonprofits in the valley to sweeten his role here. And you can buy your way in, is what I'm saying. There are sort of, you can pay an indulgence, as it were. There's an opportunity that you can buy off through donations to energy efficiency offerings. You can buy off your own high-use carbon output with things like outdoor heated pools, snow melt surfaces which surround most of these homes, burning natural gas to melt snow, because who wants to shovel snow in Aspen? I mean, we live in a place where snow ought to be cherished and loved. We are a ski industry here, and to face climate change here is, it's kind of an economic suicide as we fly private jets in here. They're wing to wing at the airport, and again, these homes are just proliferating.
That's for sure. I can't really add to that, but I just want to say that I think it's important for all of you who are concerned about energy to take a long look at the politics behind that create the playing field in which you're going to operate. Because if we continue to have what we have now, whereby our policies are increasing the waste and more energy use per capita, we've got to be aware of that. We can't just all cure it by the good things we're doing with weather stripping and solar panels and what have you. I sort of think of it, in my mind, I have a vision of an escalator standing still. And all of you who are doing good things in this arena on different steps on the escalator, hoping to get to the top. Somebody starts the escalator and it goes the other way. That is kind of the current we're all in if we don't change it. Of course, we've got too many people and we're trying to make all of them happy, but we cannot let people live all over the world and do what they want. The frontier, the western frontier, is over. We've got to have more intelligent land use planning and creation.
And yet it was that frontier experience that really honed the American character, if you look at it. I mean, we pressed from the east across the west, and the crucible of wilderness became the defining characteristic of American culture. And I mean, it reflects in self-will, in innovation, in independence, and also in democratic institutions. But as John said, that frontier is over, and yet I think it's left us with a legacy also of entitlement for a cornucopian vision of life. And we see material and energy as entitlements, and that's the way it's viewed a lot. The impacts and costs of those choices that we make in our consumption are simply not borne by the majority of the population, and obviously all of you know about that. But here, how it reflects in Aspen, which is sort of an epicenter of this what Thorsten Veblen called conspicuous consumption. We see it firsthand. And the other thing that Veblen described, that he said is even more heinous than conspicuous consumption, is conspicuous waste. And we see it in these homes. And again, it's just, they dot the hillsides, and we try to inveigle our local public officials to reduce the possibility of more, but the pressures to be are very strong.
I don't know if you know it, but Pitkin County is about 980 square miles, and only 150 square miles of that acreage is privately owned. So we live in a very special place. It's very attractive to people from all over the world. We've got to be particularly careful that we have the right regs to preserve and protect this place, not let it get overgrown or overexploited. We need to understand that there are places, beautiful places around the world, like Switzerland, incidentally, that passed a law recently that said every canton has to report, that's like county, has to report the square footage of residential in their canton and who owns it. The new law says no more than 20% of that canton can be owned by non-Swiss. Now, I don't think we ever could do something like this, but they're recognizing a problem like we have, and that's a solution they have adopted. It may be easier in Switzerland than here, but we've got to be forward-thinking and creative so we don't force our whole community, our whole local community down valley, all driving cars back and forth or living out in the country. We've got to get more intelligent about how we live here and who exactly we're going to allow to come from the outside and live anywhere. We certainly do not have to have a TDR program. A normal house in the country can go up to $5,750. Who needs to live in this environment in a house bigger than that? That is about the dumbest thing in the world. The bigger the house is, the emptier it is. It's ridiculous.
So, yeah, question.
Yes. So both of you have lived here over 40 years, and I know the one on our right pretty well. Dad, you've been involved with development. Oh, sorry.
Who are you?
Yeah, as we get older. My question to you is, as you tell everybody about how frustrating it is, and I understand it too, that we have such development and we have such economic pressures, real estate agents, yes, they want to buy. They don't want to hear you say what you just said. They don't want to hear the public come back and say, oh no, you can't sell and you can't make this amount of money, et cetera, and nor does Prince Bandar want to know that he can't have his vacation palace. So my question is, how would you advise this audience to go home and to excite their hometown people to make a difference? Do they go to their land use meetings? Do they affect the decision makers? What, in your experience, has worked the best?
We have 5 seconds for this. John, go for it.
I want to just say that the problem with being in America is that money is all important. It's more important than land and place. That's what we got to instill in our children, the importance of land, place, and community and how we live on it. It's not all about money. That money game that we see played here all the time, resulting in there being 1,500 realtors in Pitt County. How ridiculous. You know, that's our business. I think we just have to instill love of place and appreciation of the gem we all live on.
Thanks.